How's it going, guys? Mountain Man Militia here. Today I want to have a conversation about barrel life. What is it? How do we define it? And how can you determine what your own barrel life is going to be for your rifle or pistol or whatever? I have here an assortment of cartridges, and we're going to walk through it and talk about each one. And by the end of this video, you'll have a really good idea about what kind of barrel life you can expect out of your cartridge. Barrel life is essentially how many rounds you can put through a barrel, specifically the free bore, which is also called the throat. It's the portion directly in front of the bullet before it hits the rifling. How many rounds you can put through that before chemical and thermal erosion will degrade that metal enough to where you're losing a consistent degree of accuracy. And it's more on some cartridges than others. It generally has to do with a few factors. It has to do with the pressure of the cartridge. A lower pressure is going to yield a higher barrel life. It also has to do with how much powder is being pushed through that area and hot gases and how big the bore is. A smaller bore is going to erode faster than a larger bore typically, and it also depends on how hot you load it, because if you load it really hot and it's a high pressure cartridge, you're generally going to have a significantly decreased barrel life. So let's walk through these cartridges and talk about each one. So starting over here on the far left, we have a 22 long rifle, a 22 Magnum, a 380 ACP, a 45 ACP, and a 44 Remington Magnum. Now if you notice, the proportions of these cases, they're all straight wall. There's no bottlenecks on any of them, and they all don't really carry that much powder. So it's going to be a pretty big opening for the amount of powder that they're carrying. And if you're not abusing any of these guns, you will pretty much never shoot out a barrel in any of these, because it's just not going to get hot enough to erode the rifling very quickly. Like with a 45 ACP, it's a very low pressure round, and it's not going very fast. So you can expect barrel life of like 100,000 rounds out of this. Same with the 44 Magnum, although the 44 Magnum is higher pressure than the 45 ACP. But again, you have this large opening and a fairly mild powder charge. 380 ACP, that's not even, you will never burn this barrel out ever. 22 mag, albeit a Magnum cartridge, very little powder. And for especially even though it is a 22 caliber, you're never gonna have to worry about barrel life in any of these. Moving up the line, we have a 7.62x39, which is the AK cartridge, also in a lot of SKSs and other military rifles from around the world. As you can see, a little bit more powder than the pistol rounds and everything. It is a tapered case with a very slight bottleneck on it, so you're not going to get as good of barrel life as the pistol cartridges, but this is still a very, very long-lasting cartridge. Generally, with an AK, you can expect to get around 10,000 rounds out of your barrel, and before the accuracy will start to degrade from the very slow process of stripping the rifling out of the barrel. And that's going to last a very long time. Right here on the next cartridge is a 243 Winchester. Now this is where things start to change a little bit. As you can see, you have much more powder than you do a 7.62x39, but it's bottlenecked down to 243 caliber. This is basically a 308 neck down to 6mm. You have all this powder going through a fairly small hole. This is going to be where you're going to start to see accuracy degradation at shorter round counts. With a 243, you're generally looking at about 1,200 to 1,500 rounds, depending on how hot you load it. And that's the same with all of these cartridges, not the same round count, but the barrel life is going to depend on how hot you're loading it. Next, we have a 260 Remington, which is also in the 308 cartridge family. This is a 308 neck down to 6.5 millimeter, and you're going to get a little bit better barrel life out of this than you will this, because you have the same amount of powder going through a slightly larger hole. So here, where you're looking at 1200 to 1500, with the 260 Remington, you're generally looking at about 2500 rounds before you're going to start to see accuracy degradation. Next, right here, this is the good old 30-06. Bigger opening. Yes, it has more case capacity, but it does have a bottleneck, but it's a fairly long and skinny case, so the powder has a fairly large opening to get out. 30-06, you're going to see about 5,000 rounds of barrel life. Same with 308, although some 308s have been known to go upwards as much as 8,000. Just kind of depends on how hot you load it and how many successive shots you're doing in a row. So if you're like doing 3 mag dumps out of an AR-10, might not see 8,000 rounds of barrel life, but you'll still get pretty decent. Next right here is a 7mm Remington Magnum. And for a Magnum cartridge, the 7mm is not bad. You do have a lot more case capacity. Similar to a 30-06, slightly more though. It is a belted cartridge, and then it is neck down to 7mm. So with a 7mm, you're going to see generally around 2,000 rounds of barrel life. To the far right end here, where we got the big boys. So that was the 7mm Rem Mag. Right here is a 338 Winchester Magnum. So while the powder capacity stays fairly similar to the 7 mag, the diameter of the bore is now up to 338 caliber. So this actually gets fairly decent barrel life. You're generally going to be looking at about 3,000 to 4,000 rounds with this. It's not bad at all for a belted Magnum cartridge. These two are generally going to be pretty decent for Magnum cartridge as far as long barrel life, because these are typically hunting cartridges, and you're not going to be using these for high round counts most of the time. So 90%, or probably even higher than that, 99% of your average shooter is never going to burn these barrels out. Kind of a similar situation here. This is an 8mm Remington Magnum. Kind of an oddball cartridge. This came out in 1978 as a safari cartridge. It is basically a 375 H&H that's been necked down to 323 caliber. You do have more case capacity than the 338, and a smaller neck diameter slightly. So you're not going to see as good a barrel life as the 338, but I would venture to say you'd probably still get 2,000 to 3,000 rounds out of this particular case. So it's a powerhouse for sure. They don't really make a whole lot of rifles in them, but it's a good cartridge if you're willing to reload it. And then over here on the far right, these two big boys. This is a 300 Weatherby Magnum and a 300 Remington Ultra Magnum. These are pretty hot rounds. It's a lot of powder. Even though it is 30 cal, it is a lot of powder for 30 caliber. And these, you're generally going to get about 1,000 rounds of barrel life before you're going to start to see your accuracy degrade. That is contingent upon how hot you're loading it. I have seen guys that have loaded up a 300 round and burned their barrels out in 600 rounds. So be careful there. A lot of power in these. This is generally going to be the kind of rounds that you're shooting elk at 1,200 yards with. Great rounds, but just be aware of the barrel life. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you later.